We're less than 6 months away from a deeply polarizing and unpredictable presidential election in the United States. Hello, I'm Arnold Ryder, and this is The Heat. US President Joe Biden went to the US Congress to make a speech condemning anti-Semitism. America is divided between supporting or condemning Israel over its war in Gaza. Away from the barricades for Biden's adversary, Donald Trump, it was another day in court. Key witness Stormy Daniels took the stand to describe her alleged intimate encounter with the former president and how she received payment to keep quiet about it during Trump's 2016 presidential campaign, a payment that may have broken election laws. Trump denies having sex with Daniels. Sally Patterson has the latest from New York.
It's been an explosive and at times uncomfortable day of testimony in New York City, with adult film star Stormy Daniels taking the jury through her alleged relationship with Donald Trump. She says the pair met in 2006 in Lake Tahoe at a golf tournament, and she later had dinner with him at his hotel suite before he allegedly stripped down into his underwear and a sexual encounter took place. Throughout her testimony, Trump's legal team repeatedly made objections, saying it was too detailed and irrelevant to the case. Later in the day, Trump's lawyers called for a mistrial, which the judge denied. The former president has repeatedly denied having sexual relations with Daniels, who says she was paid $130,000 to keep quiet about the affair before the 2016 presidential election. Prosecutors say the payment that was made by Trump's then fixer, Michael Cohen, who initially footed the payment to Stormy Daniels, was wrongly filed as legal expenses. Trump calls the case politically motivated and a ploy to keep him from being re-elected.
This comes from the White House, and it's all Biden, because it's an attack on his political opponent. That hasn't happened in this country. It does happen in third world countries, but it hasn't happened in this country, and it's a shame. And the trial is a very unfair trial. It's a very, very unfair trial.
Trump has pleaded not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. The case is expected to last another 2 weeks, with Daniels back on the stand on Thursday. Sally Patterson, CGTN, New York.
There's a lot to talk about. Let's bring in our panelists here in our studio. Adolfo Franco is an attorney and Republican strategist. Douglas Sloan is principal at the National Capital Strategy Group here in Washington, D.C. Also here in D.C., Joseph Williams is former senior editor for U.S. News and World Report. And Jadan Horyn is a political analyst joining us from Miami. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Adolfo, let's start right here in the studio. So the trial of Donald Trump continues in that New York courtroom. We heard a lot of salacious details today about what happened with him and Stormy Daniels. Her real name is Stephanie Clifford. She's known professionally as Stormy Daniels. The defense saying, look, it was too detailed. A lot of the stuff was irrelevant. Trump has been saying for a long time that this is a political hit job, that it's political persecution and election interference. What do you make of the trial so far?
Well, it's been a kangaroo court from day one, and today, every day gets worse, and today really was over the top and crossed the Rubicon. You know, when you introduce evidence in a trial, it has to be relevant to the accusations that are before. We'll get into the, as we've talked before, the fact that these misdemeanor charges, which really what this jurisdiction is, have the statute of limitations as run on them, and that they're trying to bootstrap a federal statute, unprecedented in New York law. But putting that aside, when you had this testimony today, it's wholly irrelevant to what the charges or the supposed charges, which are bookkeeping entries and so forth, that President Trump supposedly manipulated and violated state law, a misdemeanor. They're completely irrelevant. It's salacious, as you've described them, and have absolutely nothing to do with the case that's being tried. So when you're a lawyer or a judge, you weigh the probative value of evidence, and you see whether it's not only relevant, but if something is introduced that's somehow tied and makes it relevant, you weigh it to determine if there's going to be prejudice here. So this is grounds for mistrial because it's irrelevant and fallacious and designed to color and destroy President Trump.
Very quickly, Adolfo, if that is the case, if it is irrelevant, it's too detailed, not connected to the main charges in any big way, why did the prosecution go ahead with this? Because
this has been a political persecution from the beginning, and one has to understand that the prosecution here is a political. A person has run for political office to persecute President Trump. It's a Democrat liberal who said before he even took office that he was going to persecute President Trump. So the idea here is, and this is the game plan the Democrats have, and President Trump's right, it's been coordinated by the White House from the beginning, all of these, is to have President Trump embarrassed at a minimum and hopefully convicted, so they can run against a convicted or really a felon. There's no such thing as an unconvicted felon. They can run against a felon or a person who has been subject to these salacious allegations that are, by the way, unfounded, unproven, and denied by President Trump. But that doesn't matter. That's the damage has been done, and that's why there is grounds for a mistrial. And this will all be reversed on appeal, but it will come much later in the game than should be the case.
All right, let me go to Joseph Williams. Joseph, as we just heard there, both Trump and Adolfo in the studio tells us that this is something that is being manipulated by the White House. But there have also been some sort of trials, mini trials within this trial, and that is these orders that the judge has been handing down, gag orders as they're called, trying to stop Donald Trump from criticizing witnesses, from criticizing the court, but he was found in violation of those gag orders for the 10th time, actually, and he was fined a total of $10,000. Now the judge is threatening to imprison the former president. He has threatened jail time before, but, I mean, is there any real prospect of the former president and the putative Republican candidate going to prison?
Sad to say, but there is. I mean, the problem we have here is that all of this has been unprecedented, and we keep breaking setting one precedent after another. And the defendant, former President Trump, seems intent on pushing that line. He's been warned repeatedly. He's been warned in other cases repeatedly, and yet it still keeps happening. And we want to talk about whether no man is above the law. Then certainly we have indications here that the judge is bending over backwards to avoid sending former President Trump to prison. And yet President Trump seems like he's intent on pushing that line, however far it'll go. So I think the judge may be ending up in a corner at some point where this has to happen unless former President Trump can contain himself. Now, so far it's early after the trial. We don't really know whether or not he's hit Truth Social or not. I certainly don't, because I don't have a Truth Social account. But in other words, this is not anything that's coming out of thin air. Certainly the contempt trials aren't, and neither is the evidence that's being presented. I mean, one could quibble about whether or not it's a federal charge or should be left in state court, but the bottom line here is this would not happen if there weren't any evidence. And furthermore, there are a lot of people who say that the more Trump gets into legal trouble, the higher his poll numbers rise. So you can't really have it both ways. I mean, either this is unprecedented and a political trial, or it isn't. And certainly so far the evidence shows that the politics very much aren't on the witness stand. The politics very much aren't in the evidence file.
Douglas Sloan, Donald Trump may be pushing the envelope. I mean, he could be testing the court's patience, but there are some analysts who are saying that, look, there might be some method, some strategy to what he's doing. Here is how a former Trump advisor who appeared on CNN reacted to what is going on. Let's watch this.
He's already made the strategic calculation of what being incarcerated or sentenced, even for a short time, would do to his base. It will galvanize his base, and it will feed into this messaging. He's been saying that they've been trying to attack him and gag him, and now they have incarcerated me. They've locked me up because of my speaking the truth.
So, Douglas, that was Omarosa Newman speaking there, former senior advisor to Trump. What do you make of her rationale for why the former president is behaving in the way he is?
Well, I imagine that Trump has done some calculus on trying to galvanize his base and thinking that, well, if I can make myself out to be some type of martyr, that might energize more people to vote for me. But the bottom line is his base has never been his problem. he had full MAGA support back in 2020. He doesn't have a problem galvanizing and energizing his base. He has a problem with getting moderate Democrats and independents to vote for him. And all these antics in the courtroom, and if he is held in contempt of court, and Judge Merchan sends him to jail for violating the gag order and puts him in an orange jumpsuit, that is not going to sway any moderate Democrats, any independent Republicans, and more importantly, that's going to turn off some of the college-educated law and order Republicans that simply will not vote for someone that has been convicted of a crime, full stop. So I question the calculus that he's made, if indeed he did make such a calculation, because it is very likely to backfire if he does end up in jail.
Jadan, Horyn, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, as we just heard, the former president, Donald Trump, has a lock on the Republican base. But if we look at how this trial is progressing, how the former president is behaving, how he's responding to these gag orders, could it attract in some way independent voters to see him as the victim, which he would like?
Well, I think he is the victim. Yeah. So I mean, just taking this, each thing separately. Omarosa is completely wrong. With all due respect to her, Trump's base is never going to be the problem. It's going to galvanize independents who saw Hillary Clinton, with her numerous illegal uses of classified information, given a pass in 2016. These independent voters saw Joe Biden given a pass for his age and senility. And now we have Donald Trump with, I think, 7 different cases now. We have the classified ones that was, delayed indefinitely today. But with the issue of Stormy Daniels, we have what is tabloid fodder, okay? It is not bearing on the election outcome of 2016. It is not bearing on the merits of whether or not he did something legally or illegally in the eyes of the law in front of it, right? Because this is an extension of a federal law applied to the state.
Right.
What independent voters are seeing is a weaponized judicial system. Right. And that is why poll numbers have not moved for Joe Biden. Donald Trump is leading in every swing state. Right. If, in fact, this was benefiting Joe Biden, then he would be leading. And Democrats honestly thought it would. Yeah. But the problem is they painted Trump into a victim, one that he will readily take. Absolutely, I won't deny that. He will take that mantle up, but it was given to him by Democrats. And then secondarily,
that's absolutely
cool. Trump off the electoral landscape and prevents the missteps that Democrats typically use in order to hang him by. Yeah. So there's a two-step going on right now that's preventing him from dropping polls.
Adolfo, before I move on from Donald Trump's legal challenges, there is one other development which Jadan mentioned a moment ago, and that is the Florida case, which is called the classified documents case. The judge in that case has postponed it indefinitely. Right. Is that significant? How big a deal is that?
It's huge, but before I know, I'm going to indulge me for a second. Jadan is always spot on this. And my friends, and they are my friends, Joseph and Douglas, I don't know what universe they're on. This isn't about the MAGA base. Just as Jadan has said, right now the polls show, and it continues to show, Donald Trump's approval among all Americans is increasing in every segment. Remember this program with Nathan King when they first started saying historic surrender? When the first accusations were made, this was the end of Donald Trump. So please give me a break. The American people, as Jadan says, see this for what it is, weaponization. Today's trial, today's decision in Florida is the right decision. First of all, the reason behind it is because there's accusations that Mr. Smith, the political hack here, has himself doctored documents. So there's a question now about the documents in the government's possession. So this is the right reason to hold this in abeyance for a long period of time. The practical result of this, though, Anand, is the following. This trial will not take place before the election, and that is clear. It is postponed indefinitely, and that's not going to happen before November, which is the right decision. You know, this hurry to do these trials, if they're so worried about the rule of law, play out. This person, as Jadan has said, is defending himself, this American citizen, in 7 jurisdictions simultaneously. Name me one American of high profile that has been subjected to this type of simultaneous persecution by the government without extensions and continuances. It's unprecedented.
Right. Joseph Williams, I want to go on now and look at what's happening on the Democrat side. The Gaza conflict is having a significant impact on the upcoming election. President Biden is losing support, and he's losing support of what could be significant components or parts of a winning coalition. He's losing support among Arab Americans, he's losing support among other Muslims, he's losing support among black people, he's losing support among other minorities as well. And it's not as if all these voters are going to be voting for Trump. In many instances, they're not going to go to the polls, or as we saw in the primaries, they're just going to write in uncommitted. How do you see it?
I see it as a very red blinking warning light for the Biden campaign. And I think they're trying to take heed and figure out how they're going to sort of parse these various situations. I mean, certainly President's speech at the Holocaust Memorial Museum today was one step towards addressing the turmoil on campus, another step towards maybe shoring up his Jewish base that see him buffeted by the protests on campus. I think that the campaign knows it's got a lot of work to do. I think the campaign also knows that they don't have a lot of time in which to do it. I mean, I've said that before in this program, that there's a lot of time and no time. But I think taking steps, I think there is enough time to try to get right the ship if you're a Biden supporter. And I think that the president has enough experience, I believe, to know at least that some of these things have to be addressed and others are just going to be left to fate. I mean, certainly President Trump's trial is going to really resonate in the election. And I might say towards my friend Adolfo that, yeah, it's nice on my planet because I think that my planet is the planet of reality. I mean, I don't really understand where people can kind of look at all what has happened over the last 8 years and conclude that this is some sort of political witch hunter game. I mean, I think that the rule of law is the rule of law, and no man should be above the rule of law. At least that's what it says in the Constitution. Yeah. And to have a president openly brag about some of the things that he's done, and leave a swath paper trail. I mean, this is the only stuff on the surface, and the federal government took its sweet time, if you're leaning left, to bring these charges in the first place because they did not want to appear political, but they felt like there had to be some kind of consequences for this kind of reckless action with the presidency.
I'll get you, Adolfo.
They took their sweet time to have the election, to have the trials coincide on the election year. That's why they took their sweet time. And now they're in a hurry to get it done.
Well before Donald Trump left office. And
these things started to be timed this year, and you know it.
All right, I want to get Jadan's opinion on this. All right,
they didn't want to do it. You talk about weaponization of the Justice Department.
It is.
They appointed 2 special counsels to try to handle this.
This is prosecutorial abuse.
Okay.
This is prosecutorial abuse. The prosecutors have abused their authority. These are political hacks in New York and in Georgia.
If they've abused their authority, the judge
doesn't make a decision.
I'll get back to you two guys. I want to get Jadan Horyn into this. Jadan, we just heard from Joseph Williams telling us there that the Trump trials, or the trial in this case, is going to resonate in this election. There was a CNN poll that was done which showed that if Trump is convicted, he could lose considerable support, especially among independents. How big a risk is that?
Yeah, I think that is the number one thing that I think both Donald Trump and the Biden campaign are looking at, because that is the huge unknown. There is the idea that the optics of Donald Trump being incarcerated and running from prison makes him a la Lula in Brazil as some kind of, martyr / victim. At the same time, if, and I will say this though, because this is the wrong trial for that. If this is something that is severe, such as the classified documents, then I agree with that CNN poll. But this one specifically is tabloid fodder and salacious. And I think the American people will look at it differently. But I do want to say one thing. If we're going to talk about no man is above the law, let's talk about the fact that we have a sitting United States Democratic senator and a sitting United States Democratic congressman who now are both indicted and under investigation by the Justice Department and still representing their states in Congress. So
because
let me just ask, I want to understand when Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress, was there an application of a double standard?
No, there wasn't.
You know, we need to be clear here that what is going on with Donald Trump, whether you're with President Trump or not, the voters are going to make the determination, not the courts. And that is the most important thing for us to walk away with. Is that if we allow the same thing for our elected representatives in the House and Senate, we should allow the same thing for a former United States president.
All right, I want to get back to Douglas. Douglas, I want to get back actually to the impact that the Gaza crisis is having on this election. President Biden, he was up at the United States Congress. He made an address to the Congress and blamed everything that is happening in Gaza on the Palestinian group Hamas. Let's listen to some of what he had to say.
Here we are, not 75 years later, but just 7.5 months later. And people are already forgetting. They're already forgetting that Hamas unleashed this terror. It was Hamas that brutalized Israelis. It was Hamas who took and continues to hold hostages.
So, Douglas, listening to the president there and looking at the polling that's been done in the country, not many Americans feel the same way as the president. I mean, could this Gaza issue and the way the president is responding to it cost him the election?
I don't feel that it would necessarily cost him the election. I think American voters are savvy enough to know that any anger that could be directed at Joe Biden for said support of Israel wouldn't necessarily the situation wouldn't improve if you elected Donald Trump, who was, I believe, quoted as saying, has finished the job with the other Republicans. So I don't see that happening. We have to see how this is going to play out. It's dependent upon a number of factors. Number one being, how soon is this going to wrap up? If everything wraps up in Israel, where Israel finally agrees to a ceasefire and they release the hostages on both sides and they start to rebuild the infrastructure in Gaza and start to address the very real issue, which is famine that World Health Organizations have said is happening in northern Palestine and Gaza. If they get that ball rolling and they start to address those issues, I'd say by sometime during the summer, then no, I don't think it's going to affect them at all. We live in a very robust news cycle. You know, there are going to be a lot of different issues that are going to come to the front burner, and that will be an issue that goes to the back burner. But regarding the polling issue, as the campaign guy on this panel who's run elections and has run himself for in an election, I'm just here to tell you that I'm old enough to remember President Obama trailing Mitt Romney by several points, being tied with Ron Paul and Rick Perry back in 2011 and 2012. We're still a little early out to be talking about polls, gentlemen. I know that, you know, Adolfo loves how the polls are looking.
I do.
But it's a little early, and we've seen this movie play out before.
Really?
I believe it was with Adolfo.
And Adolfo, we have talked about this before, Adolfo. But you know,
I have to say, he said the polls are going.
But let me.
That's not going to happen. It's a little early, and he had to come back and use key term. Doug was spot on.
Okay, Douglas.
With this election, because I understand what a lot of these polls look like.
Okay, let's. Let me give Adolfo a chance to respond to that. Go ahead, Adolfo.
Okay, a couple of things. A couple of things. First of all, that polling, since I was on the Romney campaign, that polling that my friend Joseph is referring to was not in May of 12. Of Douglas, I'm sorry. It was not in May of 12. This was in 11, much earlier. Well, President Obama, it was in a much better shape right now in 2012, much better, and was ahead of Mitt Romney. So that's just not the case. This is late. This not only is it late, but Obama had high numbers during his presidency. It fluctuated. There's no question. This president we have now has been in the ditch from the beginning and has only gone down. The polling is the polling. Joseph said, blinking lights. 5 alarm fire is what's going on here with their base, and they know it. They've made a decision today to go with Israel because they've come to the conclusion, unlike with Joseph, and Douglas have said that they're actually going to lose this youth vote. When you have people, Joseph and Douglas, chanting "Genocide Joe," no, they're not going to turn around and vote for Joe Biden. I agree, they're not going to vote for Donald Trump. Yeah. They're just not going to vote.
All right.
And you have to look at what happened in Michigan with the uncommitted vote. So the idea that these extreme leftists, including members of his own party, and these activists are going to now go out and vote for Genocide Joe, it's not going to happen. And they've made that political calculation. The problem is they need those voters, and that will inure to Donald Trump's benefit if they don't participate.
Right. Jadan, least we forget there are other issues which could determine the outcome of the election. I mean, young people, we're also seeing polling on this. Significant amount of young Americans are also concerned about the economy. They're also concerned about health care. I mean, ultimately, could it be sort of a traditional issue like, or traditional issues like pocketbook issues that decide the election?
Yeah, absolutely, especially with younger voters. I will say people 30 and under, they're struggling with the rapidly rising inflation, the cost of things that their paychecks straight out of college simply do not cover. And the only president that they remember is really Joe Biden, because pre-pandemic is a world away from most young people. And there's only one person to blame in their mind, and it's the person who's saying everything is fine. Yeah. That doesn't mean that they're going to vote for Donald Trump. And I think that's where the polls are very interesting, is that just because Donald Trump seems to or appears to be polling higher with young people doesn't mean that in mass young people are voting for Donald Trump. It means the dissatisfaction is so high with Biden, the disconnect of the rhetoric, the disconnect of the DC class, and I'll say this is on the Republican side as well. They have almost no connection to what's going on with costs. So because of that, I really do believe that all of these other issues aside, that the economy and inflation will be what drives most people when they vote.
Okay, I want to get to Joseph Williams. Joseph, I've only got about a minute left, in fact, less than a minute. I want to talk really quickly about what we call third-party candidates. Robert Kennedy Jr. taking away quite a significant chunk of the vote. I think it's something like 10% right now. Wow. How does that impact the two main parties?
It's going to impact one of the parties significantly. I don't think Kennedy is in all states. If he gets in all states, then you've got something to talk about. Otherwise, it's just kind of theoretical. And I did also want to note that the last time I was on this program and I cut out Adolfo was a guest, I don't think it's a coincidence. I'm just saying I think it's a conspiracy.
Okay, we hope not. We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us, and thanks, Joseph, for coming back to us as well. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.